The used Persistence groaned as it docked at Kepler Station. Metal twisted and sparked where enemy fire had torn through the hull. Captain Sarah Chun watched through the bridge window as repair crews rushed toward her ship. Their faces showed worry and surprise. Most ships that looked this bad never made it home. "Another successful patrol," said Chief Engineer Rodriguez from behind her. His voice was dry and tired. Black grease covered his hands and uniform. Sarah almost smiled. Successful was not the word most people would use. The Persistence had limped away from 3 different fights in the past week. Each time, they barely escaped with their lives. The communication system crackled to life. "UES Persistence, this is Station Control. Please report to Admiral Morrison immediately upon docking." Sarah sighed. She knew what this meant. Another lecture about staying out of trouble. Another reminder that her ship was not built for fighting. The Persistence had started life as a research vessel. It was designed to study distant stars and collect space dust. When humanity joined the Galactic Defense Coalition, every ship that could fly was converted for war. The Persistence got the worst of it. Someone had bolted weapons to its hull and called it a warship. The other species in the Coalition did not try to hide their opinions. The Kethver representatives called it the human toy boat. The Zephyrians were more polite, but Sarah had heard them whisper about Earth's flying scrap pile. They were not completely wrong. The Persistence was small compared to real warships. Its shields were weak, its weapons were old. The crew quarters were cramped, and the food recycler had not worked properly in months. But it was home to Sarah and her crew of 127 humans. Sarah walked through the corridors toward the docking bay. Crew members nodded as she passed. They looked tired but not defeated. That was important. A defeated crew was a dead crew. The docking bay was full of activity. Other ships from the Coalition fleet were here for repairs and supplies. Sarah saw the massive Kethver dreadnought Thunder of Worlds. Its hull was perfect black metal without a single scratch. Next to it, a Zephyrian cruiser gleamed with silver armor plating. Both ships were 10 times the size of the Persistence. Both had crews of thousands. Both had weapons that could destroy a small moon. "Look what the Space Cats dragged in," someone said behind Sarah. She turned to see Commander Thekai, a Kethver officer with dark fur and yellow eyes. He was grinning, showing his sharp teeth. "Commander," Sarah said politely. "I heard you had some trouble with pirates again," Theka continued. "Maybe next time you should call for backup before you get in over your head." Sarah kept her face calm. "We handled it. By running away, I heard." Thekai's grin got wider. "Very human of you." Sarah wanted to tell him that they had destroyed 2 pirate ships and captured a 3rd. She wanted to mention that the Persistence had been fighting in sectors where his mighty dreadnought was afraid to go. Instead, she just nodded and walked away. The station's main corridor was crowded with beings from dozens of species. Most were much larger than humans. They moved with confidence and purpose. Sarah felt small among them, but she was used to that feeling. Admiral Morrison's office was in the command section of the station. Sarah had been there many times before, usually to explain why the Persistence was damaged again. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting this war for 3 years, and it showed on his face. "Sit down, Sarah," he said without looking up from his desk display. Sarah sat and waited. She could see battle reports scrolling across the screen. Most showed defeats or draws. The Coalition was not winning this war. "Tell me about the Juno sector incident," Morrison said finally. Sarah took a breath. "We were on routine patrol when we detected a distress signal. A civilian transport was under attack by pirates. We moved to assist. Against orders to avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary. The transport had 300 civilians on board, sir." "Children," Morrison nodded slowly. "And you engaged 4 pirate vessels with your single ship." "We had surprise on our side." The pirates were focused on the transport. We hit them hard and fast. And then? We destroyed 2 of their ships. The 3rd one surrendered. The 4th one escaped. Morrison looked up from his screen. The pirates you captured are talking. They say this was the 5th time in 2 months that the Persistence has hit their operations. Sarah said nothing. They're calling you the ghost ship. They say you appear out of nowhere and fight like demons. Sarah still said nothing. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Sarah, I need you to understand something. The Persistence is not a frontline warship. It's barely a warship at all. Every time you engage the enemy, you're risking your crew and your ship. With respect, sir, someone has to fight in the outer sectors. The big ships stay close to the main fleet. The big ships are where they need to be. And you are where you need to be. On patrol, watching, reporting, not fighting. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. So we're supposed to let pirates attack civilian ships? You're supposed to call for backup and follow orders. Morrison stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked cold and distant. The Persistence has been assigned to the Kepler-Vega patrol route, he said. Low priority. Quiet sectors, no major enemy activity expected. Sarah understood. They were being pushed even further from the real war. Your ship will be repaired and resupplied, Morrison continued. You'll depart in 72 hours. Yes, sir. Sarah left the office feeling frustrated. The Persistence was not the strongest ship in the fleet. It was not the fastest or the most heavily armed. But it was crewed by humans who refused to give up. That had to count for something. Back on her ship, Sarah found her crew working on repairs. They moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. Captain, called out Compass, the ship's AI. Its voice came from speakers throughout. The ship. I have completed the after-action report for the Juno sector engagement. Good work, Compass. Captain, I have been analyzing our combat record. We have achieved a 93% success rate in engagements over the past 6 months. Sarah paused. What do you mean? We have encountered 47 hostile vessels. 44 have been destroyed, captured, or driven off. Only 3 have escaped without damage. Sarah had not thought about it that way. She had been focused on keeping her ship and crew alive. She had not been counting victories. Compass, are you sure about those numbers? Yes, Captain. 1 maintain detailed records of all encounters. Would you like me to compile a full report? Do that. Sarah walked to her quarters, thinking about what Compass had said. Maybe the Persistence was not as weak as everyone thought. Maybe being underestimated was an advantage. Outside her window, the stars waited. In 72 hours, they would be back among them, in the quiet sectors where no one expected them to make a difference. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes the quiet sectors were exactly where the most important work got done. 3 weeks into their patrol of the Kepler-Vega route, the Persistence encountered something unexpected. The ship's sensors picked up a massive energy signature moving through the asteroid field near Vega Prime. Captain, called Lieutenant Torres. From the sensor station. I'm reading a ship. Big one. It's hiding behind the largest asteroid. Sarah Chun moved to look at the display. The energy signature was huge, much larger than anything the Persistence should face alone. Identification? She asked. Working on it, Torres said. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. Got it. It's a Void Reaper heavy cruiser. Designation unknown. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Void Reapers were the enemy's elite ships. 1 heavy cruiser could destroy a dozen ships like the Persistence. Without breaking a sweat. What's it doing out here? Asked Rodriguez from the engineering station. Nothing good, Sarah replied. Compass, scan the area. Look for anything unusual. The ship's AI began its work. Captain, I am detecting debris patterns consistent with destroyed civilian vessels. At least 3 ships have been attacked in this area within the past 48 hours. Sarah clenched her fists. The Void Reapers were hunting civilian traffic. Merchant ships, passenger transports, medical vessels, all defenseless against a heavy cruiser. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "we should report this and request backup." Sarah knew Torres was right. Standard procedure was to avoid engagement with superior forces. Call for help and wait for real warships to handle the problem. But help would take days to arrive. By then, the Void Reaper would be gone and more civilians would be dead. "Rodriguez," Sarah said, "what do we have that could hurt that thing?" The chief engineer looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Captain, that's a heavy cruiser. Our weapons can barely scratch its paint. I didn't ask what we don't have. I asked what we do have." Rodriguez thought for a moment. "Well, we've still got the deep core mining laser from our research days. It's designed to cut through asteroid rock." "How powerful?" "Very powerful, but it's got a range of maybe 2 kilometers. And it takes 30 seconds to charge between shots." Sarah nodded. "What else?" "The gravity manipulation array. We used it to move asteroids for study. It can create artificial gravity wells or push objects around." "Weapons officer," Sarah called to Ensign Park, "what's the effective range on our missile tubes?" "Standard range is 15 kilometers, Captain. But ... Quotes Park hesitated. "But what?" "I've been working on something. If we remove the safety limiters and pack extra fuel into the missiles, I can get maybe 25 kilometers. They won't be very accurate at that range, though." Sarah was starting to see possibilities. "Compass, show me the asteroid field layout." A 3-dimensional map appeared on the main screen. Hundreds of asteroids floated in space, ranging from small rocks to massive chunks of stone and metal. "Can we hide in there?" Sarah asked. "Our ship is small enough to navigate between the larger asteroids," Compass replied. "However, the Void Reaper cruiser cannot follow without significant risk to its hull." Sarah smiled. "Then we don't fight them in open space. We make them come to us." Rodriguez shook his head. "Captain, this is crazy. Even if we could damage them, they'll call for backup. We'll be dead in an hour." "Maybe," Sarah said. "But those civilians will still be alive." "Torres, can you jam their communications?" Torres checked her instruments. "For a short time, yes. Our electronic warfare suite is actually pretty good. Leftover from our research days." Sarah looked around the bridge. Her crew was scared, but they trusted her. They had been through impossible situations before. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "We're going into that asteroid field. We'll use the mining laser to cut a tunnel through the biggest asteroid. Then we'll wait." The plan was simple but dangerous. The Persistence would hide inside a hollowed-out asteroid. When the Void Reaper came looking for them, they would spring their trap dot. It took 6 hours to prepare. Rodriguez and his engineering team worked to modify the mining laser for combat use. Park programmed new targeting solutions for the missiles. Torres prepared the jamming systems. The mining laser cut through solid rock like a knife through butter. The Persistence burrowed deep into the asteroid, creating a perfect hiding place. "Now we wait," Sarah said. They didn't wait long. The Void Reaper had detected their energy signature and was moving into the asteroid field. The enemy ship moved slowly, carefully avoiding the larger rocks. "They're scanning," Torres reported. "Looking for us." "Let them look," Sarah replied. "Compass, prepare to activate the gravity array. I want you to grab some of those smaller asteroids." "Understood, Captain." The Void Reaper came closer. Sarah could see it through the sensors. A massive black ship bristling with weapons. It was beautiful and terrifying. "They're directly above us," Torres whispered. "Now," Sarah said. Several things happened at once. Compass activated the gravity array. pulling dozens of small asteroids toward the Void Reaper. The rocks smashed into the ship's shields, causing no real damage but creating a perfect distraction. At the same moment, Torres activated the jamming system. The Void Reaper's communications went dead. Park fired all 4 missiles at maximum range. They streaked through space, using the asteroid impacts as cover. The Persistence burst from its hiding place like an angry wasp. Rodriguez had the mining laser charged and ready. The Void Reaper's crew was caught completely off guard. They had been looking for a small patrol ship, not an asteroid full of surprises. 2 of the missiles found their target, exploding against the cruiser's rear shields. The shields held, but they flickered and weakened. The Persistence raced forward, closing the distance. Sarah could see the enemy ship's weapons turning toward them, but they were designed to fight other large ships, not something as small and fast as the Persistence. 2 kilometers, Rodriguez called out, firing. The mining laser lanced out, a brilliant beam of focused energy. It struck the Void Reaper's shield generator and burned through the weakened barrier like it was made of paper. The beam continued, cutting deep into the cruiser's hull. Systems exploded and atmosphere vented into space. Again. Sarah shouted, but the Void Reaper was already moving, turning to bring its main weapons to bear. A massive energy blast passed so close to the Persistence that the hull plating glowed red-hot. Sarah threw the ship into a wild spin, diving between 2 asteroids. The cruiser's next shot shattered one of the rocks, filling space with deadly debris. "They're launching fighters," Torres reported. Sarah cursed. The Persistence couldn't outrun fighters in open space. "Rodriguez, can you overload something? Make it look like we're disabled? I can shut down the main engines and vent some plasma. It'll look like we're dying. Do it." The Persistence went dark and began to drift. To the Void Reaper's sensors, it looked like a dying ship. The fighters moved in for the kill, but as they approached, Rodriguez fired the mining laser again. At close range, it cut through the lead fighter like a hot knife. The other fighters scattered in panic. "Missiles!" Park shouted. "Incoming!" Sarah spun the ship again, using the asteroids for cover. The missiles exploded harmlessly against the rocks. The battle continued for 20 minutes. The Persistence darted between asteroids like a minnow avoiding a shark. Every time the Void Reaper thought it had them cornered, the little ship would vanish or attack from an unexpected direction. Rodriguez used the mining laser to carve chunks off asteroids, creating debris clouds that blocked the cruiser's sensors. Park fired missiles at impossible angles, using the asteroids to bounce his shots around corners. Torres kept the enemy's communications jammed and fed false sensor readings to their targeting systems. Finally, the Void Reaper had enough. The massive ship was damaged and frustrated. It began to withdraw from the asteroid field. "Let them go," Sarah said when Park asked for permission to pursue. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Rodriguez started laughing. "We just made a heavy cruiser run away," he said. "A heavy cruiser," Sarah smiled. "They had done more than survive. They had won. Compass," she said. "Add this to our combat record." "Already done, Captain." That brings our total to 48 enemy encounters with 45 victories. Sarah looked at the asteroid field around them. Maybe Admiral Morrison was wrong. Maybe the quiet sectors were exactly where the Persistence belonged. In the distance, the Void Reaper disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news of a small human ship that fought like nothing they had ever seen before. 6 months later, the hull of the Persistence was covered in small white marks. Each mark represented an enemy ship destroyed or captured. The crew had started painting them after their 3rd major victory, when they realized their success was not just luck. Sarah Chun stood in the cargo bay, watching Ensign Martinez add 3 new marks to the collection. The paint was bright white against the dark metal of the hull. "How many is that now?" asked Rodriguez, who was welding a new armor plate nearby. 87 confirmed kills, Martinez replied. Plus 23 captures and 15 ships disabled. Rodriguez whistled softly. I remember when we celebrated our first kill. Now we need a bigger wall. Sarah nodded. The numbers still surprised her. When they started this patrol route, she had hoped to keep her crew alive and maybe help a few civilians. She never expected to become one of the most successful ships in the Coalition fleet. The success had come from fighting enemies that the big ships ignored. Pirates, smugglers, slave traders, black market weapons dealers. They operated in the empty spaces between star systems, where patrol ships rarely went. The persistence had made those spaces dangerous for criminals. Captain, called Compass over the ship's communication system. I have an incoming message from Fleet Command. Sarah frowned. Fleet Command rarely contacted ships on patrol unless something was wrong. She made her way to the bridge, where Lieutenant Torres was already pulling up the message. It's from Admiral Morrison, Torres said, and Admiral Chun from Strategic Planning. They want to review our quarterly combat reports. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. She had been sending the required reports, but she wondered if someone had finally noticed what they were doing out here. When do they want to meet? She asked. As soon as we can reach Kepler Station. They're requesting immediate return from patrol. Sarah looked around the bridge. Her crew had grown confident over the past months. They moved with the smooth efficiency of veterans. It would be hard to explain to Fleet Command that this confidence came from fighting battles they were supposed to avoid. The journey to Kepler Station took 4 days. During that time, Sarah reviewed their combat records with Compass. The numbers were impressive, even to her dot in 6 months. The Persistence had destroyed 87 enemy vessels. They had captured 23 others, turning them over to coalition authorities. They had rescued over 2,000 civilians from pirates and slavers. They had shut down 5 major smuggling operations. All of this in sectors that Fleet Command considered low priority. Kepler Station looked the same as always when they docked. The massive coalition ships were still there, still perfect and untouched. But now Sarah noticed something different. The crews from those ships looked at the Persistence with curiosity instead of mockery. Word had spread through the fleet about the little human ship that kept winning impossible fights. Admiral Morrison's office was crowded when Sarah arrived. Morrison was there, along with Admiral Chun from Strategic Planning and 2 officers she didn't recognize. One was a tall Kethver with silver fur. The other was a Zephyrian female with blue skin and 4 arms. Sit down, Captain, Morrison said. His voice was careful and neutral. Sarah sat and waited. She could feel the weight of their attention. Admiral Chun activated a holographic display that showed the Kepler Vega patrol route. Red dots marked every engagement the Persistence had fought. Captain Chun, Admiral Chun began. Your combat reports made for interesting reading. Thank you, sir. 87 confirmed enemy kills in 6 months. That's more than some battleships achieve in 2 years of active combat. Sarah said nothing. The Kethver officer leaned forward. I am Admiral Threkver of the Kethver Defense Force. My intelligence officers have been analyzing your tactics. They are unusual. How so, sir? You use mining equipment as weapons. You hide inside asteroids. You target enemy waste disposal systems. Threkver's ears twitched, which Sarah had learned was a sign of confusion among his species. These are not standard military tactics. They work, sir. Yes, they do. That's what puzzles us. The Zephyrian officer spoke for the first time. I am Admiral Zethara. I have commanded ships for 30 years. I have never seen anything like your combat record. Admiral Chun brought up another display. This one showed ship classifications and kill counts for the entire coalition fleet. Captain, do you see your ship on this list? Sarah looked at the display. The names were arranged by total enemy kills. At the top were the massive dreadnoughts and battleships with crews of thousands. Their kill counts ranged from 15 to 40-5. Then she saw it. Near the top of the list, highlighted in yellow, was the UE's persistence, 87 kills. You have the third highest kill count in the entire Coalition fleet, Admiral Chun said quietly. Higher than ships 50 times your size. Higher than ships that have been fighting this war since it began. Sarah stared at the display. She had known they were successful, but seeing it compared to the rest of the fleet was shocking. How? Asked Admiral Threkver. Your ship has no heavy weapons. No thick armor, no shields worth mentioning. By every measure, it should be at the bottom of this list. Sarah thought about how to answer. We fight differently, sir. We go places the big ships can't go. We fight enemies the big ships don't bother with. Pirates and smugglers, Morrison said. Criminals. Criminals with military-grade weapons, Sarah replied. Criminals who kill civilians and sell people as slaves. Criminals who fund the enemy war effort. But they're not frontline enemy forces, Admiral Zethora pointed out. No, sir, but they're still enemies. And apparently, no one else was fighting them. The room was quiet for a long moment. Sarah could hear the station's life support systems humming in the background. Admiral Chun finally spoke. Captain, we need to understand how you're doing this. Your tactics could be valuable for other ships. I'm not sure they would work for other ships, sir. We fight the way we do because we have to. We don't have the luxury of heavy weapons or thick armor, explain. Sarah chose her words carefully. When you can't win through strength, you have to win through cleverness. When you can't take damage, you have to avoid it. When you can't fight fair, you have to fight smart. Admiral Threkver's ears twitched again. You're saying weakness can be a strength? I'm saying that being underestimated is an advantage. Our enemies don't expect a research ship to fight like a warship. They don't expect us to use mining equipment as weapons. They don't expect us to hide inside asteroids. And by the time they figure out what's happening, Rodriguez would have added if he were there, it's too late. Admiral Morrison leaned back in his chair. Captain, we're going to be studying your methods. Other ships may need to learn from your example. Sarah nodded. Whatever you need, sir. For now, you'll continue your current patrol route, but we'll be watching more closely. And we'll be expecting detailed reports on every engagement. The meeting ended with Sarah feeling uncertain. She was proud of what her crew had accomplished, but she worried about what would happen if Fleet Command tried to make other ships fight like the Persistence. Back on her ship, she found her crew painting more marks on the hull. They had intercepted a weapons smuggler on the way to the station, adding one more victory to their record. How did the meeting go? Rodriguez asked. They noticed us, Sarah replied. Is that good or bad? Sarah looked at the white marks covering the hull of her ship. Each one represented lives saved and enemies defeated. Her crew had done more good in 6 months than some ships did in years. I guess we'll find out, she said. Compass spoke from the ship speakers. Captain, I have been analyzing fleet combat statistics. Based on current trends, the Persistence will have the highest kill count in Coalition history within 4 months. Sarah smiled despite her worries. Compass, are you sure about that? Yes, Captain. We are currently averaging 14 enemy kills per month. The current record holder, the Kethfor Dreadnought Fury of Stars, achieved 138 kills over 15 years of service. Sarah did the math quickly. They needed 51 more kills to break the record. At their current rate, that would take less than 4 months. Compass, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're just trying to do our job. Of course, Captain. But I thought you should know that our job apparently involves making history. Sarah laughed. When she had been assigned to command the Persistence, she thought her career was over. Now it seemed like it was just beginning. Outside the ship, the stars waited. Somewhere among them, criminals were preying on innocent civilians. The big ships of the Coalition fleet were fighting the main war, but the Persistence had found its own war to fight, and they were winning it, one small white mark at a time. The emergency alert reached the Persistence while they were investigating a distress signal near the Helix Nebula. Captain Sarah Chun read the message twice before she believed it. All available ships report to Grid 7 immediately. Enemy breakthrough. At the Helix defense line, Coalition forces in full retreat. Lieutenant Torres looked up from her station. Captain, that's where the main fleet is stationed. If they're retreating ... Then we're losing the war, Sarah finished. The Helix Nebula was supposed to be impossible to attack. The Coalition had built a massive defense line there, using the nebula's natural radiation to hide sensor arrays and weapon platforms. 50 of the Coalition's best ships guarded the passage. If the enemy had broken through, nowhere was safe. Set course for Grid 7, Sarah ordered. Maximum speed. Captain, Rodriguez called from engineering. We're not equipped for a major fleet battle. We don't have the armor or the weapons. Sarah knew he was right. The Persistence had been designed to fight small groups of pirates and smugglers. A full-scale battle with enemy dreadnoughts was beyond their capabilities, but the message had said all available ships. That included them. The journey to Grid 7 took 18 hours. As they approached the battle zone, the scope of the disaster became clear. Debris from destroyed Coalition ships floated in space like metal snow. Emergency beacons blinked desperately from escape pods. My God, Torres whispered. The main Coalition fleet was scattered and broken. Sarah could see the massive Kefir dreadnought Thunder of Worlds limping away with half its hull torn open. Zephyrian cruisers fired desperately at pursuing enemy ships, and advancing through the chaos came the enemy fleet. Void Reaper ships moved in perfect formation, their black hulls gleaming with energy shields. At their center was something Sarah had only seen in intelligence reports. A Void Reaper command ship, nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could destroy a planet. Captain, Compass announced, I am receiving a general communication from Admiral Morrison. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. He looked exhausted and desperate. All ships, this is Morrison. The enemy has broken our lines. They have some kind of new weapon that disrupts our shields. We've lost 37 ships in the past 6 hours. Sarah felt her heart sink. 37 ships. Thousands of crew members. All remaining vessels are to fall back to the secondary defense line, Morrison continued. We'll regroup and... The transmission cut off suddenly. Sarah saw why. The Admiral's flagship, the battleship Defiant, was under attack by 3 Void Reaper cruisers. Captain, Torres said urgently, we're receiving assignment orders. We're supposed to provide mop-up operations. Search for survivors and stay out of the main battle. Mop-up operations. Even now, in the middle of the worst defeat in Coalition history, they were being told to stay out of the real fighting. Sarah watched the enemy fleet advance. In a few hours, they would break through completely. The war would be over, unless someone did something. Torres, scan the nebula. Look for anything we can use. Captain? The nebula has radiation storms, magnetic fields, dense gas clouds. Things that might interfere with sensors or shields. Torres worked quickly. There's a massive ion storm about 50 kilometers to our left, and several areas of dense metallic particles that would block most sensors. Sarah studied the tactical display. An idea was forming in her mind. A crazy, desperate idea that would probably get them all killed, but it might work. Rodriguez, can you overload our mining laser? Make it more powerful than normal? I can try, but it might burn out completely. We'd only get one shot. One shot? At what? Torres asked. Sarah pointed at the enemy command ship. That. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Rodriguez started laughing, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Captain, that ship has armor thick enough to stop a battleship's main guns. Our mining laser wouldn't even scratch it." "Not the armor," Sarah said. "But what if we could get past the armor?" She activated the ship's analysis computer and began studying the command ship's design. Like all Void Reaper ships, it was built for maximum intimidation. Black hull, angular. Design, weapons pointed in every direction, but it was also huge. And huge ships had huge vulnerabilities. "Compass, analyze the enemy command ship. Look for weak points." "Scanning," the eye replied. "The ship appears to have standard Void Reaper defenses. Heavy armor, strong shields, multiple redundant systems." "What about maintenance access points? Docking bays? Waste disposal?" "There are 17 docking bays along the lower hull, each protected by force fields. There are also numerous waste disposal ports, but they are heavily shielded." Sarah smiled grimly. Not all of them. She had fought enough Void Reaper ships to know their weakness. They were arrogant. They built their ships to look invincible, but they cut corners in places they thought no one would attack. "Torres, take us into the nebula. Use the ion storms to mask our approach." "Captain, the radiation will cook us if we stay in there too long." "We won't be in there long." The Persistence dove into the swirling chaos of the Helix Nebula. Outside, the ship, lightning crackled between clouds of superheated gas. The hull temperature began to rise immediately. "Radiation levels increasing," Torres reported. "We can handle maybe 10 minutes of this. That's all we need." Sarah guided the ship through the storm, using her knowledge of nebula navigation from their research days. The Persistence had been designed to study phenomena like this. It could survive where warships couldn't go. Behind them, the battle continued. Sarah could hear radio communications from the fleeing coalition ships. They were falling back, abandoning the nebula to the enemy. "There," Sarah said, pointing at the tactical display. "The command ship is moving to secure the main passage. It's focusing all its attention on the retreat." The enemy ship was massive and beautiful and terrible. It moved through space like a metal mountain, utterly confident in its power. "Rodriguez, is that laser ready?" "As ready as it's going to be. But Captain, even if we damage them, they'll call for help. The entire enemy fleet will come after us." "Not if we're quick enough." "Torres, are the jamming systems ready?" "Yes, but they won't work for long against a ship that size." Sarah took a deep breath. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to come out of the nebula right behind them. Torres will jam their communications. Rodriguez will fire the mining laser at their main waste disposal port. Then we'll disappear back into the nebula before they know what hit them." "And if it doesn't work?" Rodriguez asked. "Then we die trying." The Persistence burst from the nebula like a ghost materializing from a storm. The command ship was directly ahead, its massive bulk filling the viewscreen. Torres activated the jamming systems. Rodriguez fired the overloaded mining laser. The beam lanced out, brighter and more powerful than it had ever been. It struck the command ship's waste disposal port and burned through the minimal shielding like it wasn't there. The laser continued, cutting deep into the ship's interior. It sliced through waste processing systems, power conduits, and structural supports. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The command ship continued on its course, apparently undamaged. Then the explosions began. Waste gases, compressed for disposal, ignited in a chain reaction. The fire spread through the ship's interior, following the path the laser had cut. Secondary explosions rippled along the hull as power systems overloaded. The command ship began to list to one side. "Trailing debris and atmosphere. It's working." Torres breathed, but the enemy ship wasn't destroyed. It was damaged and angry, and it was turning toward them. "Get us out of here," Sarah ordered. The Persistence dove back into the nebula just as the command ship's weapons opened fire. Energy. Beams cut through the space where they had been seconds before. "Captain," Compass announced calmly, "I have an update on our combat record." "Not now, Compass. I believe this is relevant. With the damage inflicted on the enemy command ship, we have now achieved 139 confirmed enemy kills. This surpasses the previous record of 138, held by the HFY Dreadnought Fury of Stars." Sarah stared at the IS display. "We broke the record?" "Yes, Captain. The UES Persistence now has the highest confirmed kill count in recorded galactic military history." Through the nebula's chaos, Sarah could see the enemy command ship struggling to maintain formation. The damage they had inflicted was spreading, systems failing throughout the massive vessel. And behind the command ship, something unexpected was happening. The retreating coalition forces had seen the enemy flagship in trouble. Instead of running, they were turning back to fight. The tide of battle was turning, and it had started with one desperate attack by the galaxy's supposedly weakest ship. Sarah smiled as she watched coalition vessels close in on the wounded command ship. Sometimes the smallest actions had the biggest consequences. "Torres, get me a communication channel to all coalition ships." "Channel open, Captain." "This is Captain Chun of the UES Persistence. The enemy command ship has been damaged. All ships, attack now while they're vulnerable." The response was immediate. Dozens of coalition ships emerged from their retreat, weapons blazing. The wounded command ship, unable to coordinate its defenses properly, began to buckle under the fire under the assault. Sarah watched as the ship that had seemed invincible minutes before began to break apart under concentrated fire. "Captain." 3 months after the Battle of the Helix Nebula, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the Coalition War Museum on New Geneva. Behind her, in a place of honor, was a perfect scale model of the UES Persistence. A small plaque beside it read, "Most successful warship in galactic history, minus 247 confirmed enemy kills." The number had grown since the battle. Word of the Persistence's record had spread throughout enemy territory, and desperate criminals had tried to claim the bounty placed on the ship. Each attempt had only added to their total. "Captain Chun?" Sarah turned to see a young Zephyrian officer approaching. His blue skin was marked with the silver tattoos of a military academy graduate. "I am Lieutenant Vextar of the Zephyrian Defense Corps. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "My ship, the Swift Current, is being converted using your methods. Smaller weapons, better sensors, modified for unconventional warfare. We have studied every battle the Persistence fought." Sarah nodded politely. "I hope it serves you well. May I ask you something? How did you know it would work, fighting the way you did?" Sarah thought about the question. "We didn't know. We just did what we had to do." The young officer looked confused. "But the tactics, the strategy, the careful planning." "Lieutenant, there was no grand strategy. We were just trying to survive and help people. Everything else came after." Before the officer could respond, Admiral Morrison approached. "Captain, there's someone I'd like you to meet." He led her to where an elderly HFY was examining the museum displays. The alien's fur was white with age, and his uniform carried more medals than Sarah had ever seen. "Captain Chun, this is Fleet Admiral Vekmar, Supreme Commander of HFY forces." Sarah snapped to attention. Vekmar was a legend. He had commanded fleets when Sarah was still in school. "At ease, Captain," Vekmar said. His voice was deep and thoughtful. "I have been studying your ship's combat records. Very interesting." "Thank you, sir. I have a question. My tactical staff has analyzed your battles. They say your success rate should be impossible. You engage enemies that outgun you by factors of 10 or 20. By all mathematical models, you should have been destroyed in your first engagement." Sarah waited. "So how are you still alive?" Sarah smiled. "Because we never fought fair, sir." Vekmar's ears twitched with amusement. "Explain." Every battle we won because the enemy expected us to fight like a proper warship. They expected US to line up and trade shots until the stronger ship won. We never did that. Instead, we hid inside asteroids. We used mining equipment as weapons. We targeted systems that no military officer would think to defend. We made them fight our war, not theirs. Vekmar nodded slowly. My staff has been trying to teach other ships your methods. The results have been mixed. It won't work for everyone, Sarah said. A dreadnought can't hide inside an asteroid. A battleship can't pretend to be a cargo vessel. Our tactics worked because everyone underestimated us. And now? Sarah gestured toward the museum display. Now everyone knows about us. The advantage is gone. Admiral Morrison joined the conversation. That's why we're here, Captain. We need to talk about your future. They moved to a quiet corner of the museum. Morrison activated a privacy screen that blocked their conversation from other visitors. Sarah, every major fleet wants to study your methods. The Zephyrians want to build 12 ships like the Persistence. The Kethver are redesigning their entire patrol strategy. Even the humans are talking about commissioning a new class of ships based on your success. And we're offering you command of the new program. Admiral Chun, in charge of developing unconventional warfare tactics for the entire Coalition fleet. Sarah looked at the model of her ship. Someone had painted tiny white marks on its hull, just like the real thing. What about the Persistence? She'd be retired to the museum. A place of honor. Sarah shook her head. No, Morrison blinked. No. Admiral, with respect, you're missing the point. The Persistence didn't succeed because of some grand tactical theory. We succeeded because we were desperate and creative and nobody paid attention to us. I don't understand. Sarah pointed to the museum display showing the Battle of the Helix Nebula. Look at that battle. We won because the enemy command ship ignored us. They saw a tiny research vessel and decided we weren't worth worrying about. If I'm commanding a fleet of ships designed for unconventional warfare, that advantage disappears. Fleet Admiral Vekmar leaned forward. You're saying your strength came from being overlooked? Exactly. The moment you make this official, it stops working. Enemy commanders will start planning for unconventional attacks. They'll defend the systems we use to target. They'll expect asteroid ambushes and mining laser attacks. Morrison frowned. So what do you suggest? Let me keep doing what I'm doing. The Persistence still has work to finish. What work? Sarah smiled. Admiral, our success didn't end the war. It just changed it. The enemy's main fleets are defeated, but their support networks are still out there. Pirates, smugglers, mercenaries. All the small groups that keep their war machine running. The Coalition's main fleet can handle them now. Can they? Admiral, when was the last time a dreadnought chased down a smuggler? When was the last time a battleship investigated a distress call in an empty system? Sarah gestured toward the young Zephyrian officer they had met earlier. Lieutenant Vexstar is excited about converting his ship to our methods. But his ship is still a military vessel with a military crew and military thinking. They'll do well, but they'll never fight like we do, because they're not desperate enough. Vekmar asked. Because they're not forgotten enough. The Persistence works because we're still just a converted research ship with a crew that everyone thinks is crazy. We go places other ships won't go and fight battles other ships won't fight. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "What if I ordered you to take the promotion?" Sarah met his eyes. Then you'd be making a mistake, sir. Admiral Vekmar started laughing, a deep rumbling sound. Morrison, I like this human. She understands something my staff has missed. What's that? You cannot manufacture desperation. You cannot order creativity. And you cannot make someone fight like they have nothing to lose when they have everything to gain. Morrison sighed. So you want to go back to patrol duty? Yes, sir. There are still civilian ships being attacked out there. Still people who need help. Still enemies who think the war is over and they can go back to business as usual. Sarah looked at the museum display one more time. The model of the Persistence looked small and fragile next to the displays of massive dreadnoughts and battle cruisers. "Admiral, my ship has the highest kill count in galactic history, but that's not what I'm proud of." "What are you proud of?" "We've rescued over 8,000 civilians. We've shut down 47 criminal organizations. We've made the space lanes safer for everyone." Sarah turned away from the display. "The enemy's main fleets are broken, but the war isn't over. It's just moved to the shadows, and that's where the Persistence belongs." 3 days later, the Persistence departed New Geneva with fresh supplies and a new mission. They were returning to the outer sectors, to the forgotten spaces where criminals thought they were safe. As they jumped to hyperspace, Sarah stood on the bridge watching the stars stretch into lines. The hull around them was covered with 247 white marks, each one representing a victory that the galaxy's military experts said should have been impossible. "Captain," Compass announced, "I have detected several distress signals from the Tau sector. Pirates are reported to be attacking civilian convoys." Sarah smiled. "Set course for the Tau sector. It sounds like someone needs our help." Behind them, military academies would study their battles for decades. Engineers would try to copy their modifications. Tacticians would write papers about their unconventional methods. But out in the dark between the stars, the real war continued. And the Persistence was exactly where it belonged, in the places where desperate people needed help and impossible victories were just another day's work. The galaxy's most successful warship disappeared into hyperspace, ready to prove once again that sometimes the weakest ship is actually the strongest.